I don't know. Good morning. It's Rachel Zegler. Whoa, she's on YouTube. It's probably been well over 6 months.
The fallout surrounding Disney's Snow White remake has intensified beyond what anyone in the industry could have imagined, escalating to levels that now resemble a full-blown crisis. What was once seen as a risky but manageable controversy has snowballed into something much larger, with headlines, online debates, and insider gossip amplifying the sense of disaster. Many industry spectators had warned of an imminent collapse, predicting that the project's missteps would eventually catch up with it. Now, the grim reality is playing out exactly as the cynics foresaw. Executives, critics, and even fellow cast members are circling like vultures, seemingly eager to assign Rachel Zegler the bulk of the blame for the film's poor reception and disappointing box office results. While it may be unfair to hold her solely responsible, the perception remains that she contributed heavily to the downfall. If she didn't hammer the final nail into the coffin, many argue she certainly helped drive in the last few that sealed its fate. From the very beginning, casting Rachel Zegler as Snow White was a divisive decision. To put it bluntly, she never truly seemed to embody the essence of the iconic character. Snow White has long been associated with innocence, joy, and a kind of timeless fairy tale beauty that captivates audiences. Yet, in the promotional material, Zegler appeared distant and detached. Instead of the warm, cheerful presence fans expected, her demeanor often came across as overly serious or even uninterested. This disconnect fueled the belief that she was miscast from the start, and it planted seeds of doubt that continued to grow throughout the film's troubled rollout. Behind the glossy marketing campaigns, tensions were brewing within the studio itself. A recent Variety report revealed the extent of the drama unfolding behind the scenes, offering new insight into how the controversy spiraled out of control. According to the report, the turning point came in August of last year when Zegler, fresh off Disney's high-profile D23 event, shared an Instagram video expressing support for Palestine. The post, which quickly went viral and racked up nearly 9 million views, sent shockwaves through Disney's executive offices. The political message had not been cleared with the studio, and for a company that carefully guards its family-friendly image, the move was seen as reckless. Executives were caught off guard and reportedly alarmed by the sudden firestorm of attention it created. In response, the studio acted swiftly and decisively. One of the film's lead producers, Mark Platt, allegedly flew to New York specifically to confront Zegler over the issue. According to insiders, he urged her to remove the video and scrub any similar content from her social media accounts in an effort to contain the fallout. The incident not only strained her relationship with Disney leadership, but also deepened the sense of unease surrounding the production. What began as a casting controversy had now evolved into a political flashpoint, dragging the film into even more unwanted headlines and solidifying the perception that the project was doomed long before it ever hit theaters. What makes this entire situation especially explosive is the fragile and often tense dynamic between Rachel Zegler and Gal Gadot, who portrayed the evil queen in the film. Insiders revealed that their relationship behind the scenes was far from smooth, with multiple accounts describing it as erratic, unpredictable, and at times openly strained. For a production already under heavy scrutiny, this lack of cohesion between its two leads was viewed as a major red flag. Disney had invested heavily in the chemistry of its stars to carry the narrative, yet reports suggest that the friction only added more instability to a project already drowning in controversy. Rachel Zegler's reputation as a difficult figure to manage didn't begin with Snow White. Industry observers point out that similar challenges emerged during her first major role in West Side Story, a performance that simultaneously catapulted her into stardom and showcased her uncompromising personality. Although she won a Golden Globe for her portrayal, producers at the time reportedly noticed her reluctance to conform, her strong opinions, and her unwillingness to be micromanaged. While such traits can be admirable in an established star, they often clash with the controlled, image-focused approach Disney demands from its leads, especially in family-oriented projects meant to appeal to a global audience. The conflict escalated significantly when Zegler took a bold political stance on social media, expressing her support for Palestine. While the post may have been personal and heartfelt, its timing and visibility had far-reaching consequences. According to Variety, the message, shared shortly after Disney's D23 promotional event, garnered millions of views and set off alarm bells in executive offices. Disney, known for carefully curating its brand image to avoid overt political entanglements, was blindsided. What made matters worse was the direct impact the post reportedly had on Gal Gadot. As an Israeli actress, Gadot became the target of death threats following Zegler's remarks, forcing Disney to take the unusual step of enhancing security around its promotional campaigns. Instead of a smooth rollout filled with red carpets, fan meet and greets, and carefully scripted interviews, the studio found itself navigating the logistics of protecting its cast amid rising political tensions. One insider quoted by Variety claimed that Zegler seemed unaware of the broader consequences of her actions, not just for the marketing strategy of Snow White, but also for the personal safety of her co-star and the already fragile public image of the film. Whether intentional or not, her posts added fuel to a fire that was already burning out of control. Some analysts now believe the studio is deliberately redirecting the film's collapse onto Zegler, painting her political comments as the central reason for its downfall, rather than acknowledging the deeper creative and structural issues that plagued the production from the start. Zegler's political outspokenness wasn't limited to the Israel-Palestine debate. She had previously drawn criticism for her candid reaction to Donald Trump's election victory years earlier. In an emotional Instagram post, she expressed her devastation, stating that she felt unable to speak at the thought of enduring another 4 years of hostility. She also accused Trump supporters of never truly understanding peace. While her comments reflected the sentiments of many within Hollywood at the time, they resurfaced in a much more polarized climate, further complicating her public image. By voicing such strong opinions across different political moments, she managed to alienate potential audiences on both sides. Conservatives resented her anti-Trump stance, while some liberal groups expressed frustration over her handling of the Palestine issue. At the same time, Snow White was already facing resistance on creative grounds. Longtime fans criticized the film for abandoning the original fairy tale's charm, complaining that it had strayed too far from the classic narrative that made the animated version a timeless treasure. What could have been a celebrated reimagining instead became the target of skepticism and resentment, with audiences accusing Disney of stripping away the innocence and magic of the source material. When these creative controversies collided with Zegler's political remarks and the rumored on-set tensions, it created the perfect storm. The results speak for themselves. Box office numbers fell dramatically short of projections, reviews were scathing, and the film that was once touted as a cornerstone of Disney's live-action strategy is now widely regarded as a cautionary tale. It illustrates how a combination of miscasting, political missteps, internal conflicts, and risky creative changes can unravel even the most ambitious projects. What Disney hoped would be a triumphant reinvention of a beloved classic instead turned into a public relations disaster, one that continues to spark debate, divide fans, and cast a long shadow over Rachel Zegler's rising career. At present, Snow White sits at a dismal audience rating of just 1, 8 out of 10, a shockingly low score that places it beneath even some of the most notorious box office flops. To put that into perspective, its reception has been compared unfavorably to Dragon Ball Evolution, a film widely ridiculed for years as one of the worst live-action adaptations ever made. Unfortunately for Disney, the numbers at the box office tell an equally bleak story. The film opened globally to a meager $82 million, a devastating return for a project that insiders estimate cost somewhere between $250 million and $350 million to produce. The scale of the financial shortfall becomes clearer when compared to other recent films. For example, Snow White earned $34 million less in its opening frame than Joker, Folie à Deux, which had itself been criticized for underperforming relative to expectations. To make matters worse, Variety reported that the live-action remake of Snow White actually cost $70 million more to produce than the Joker sequel, creating a staggering imbalance between its budget and its earnings. A representative from a rival studio summed up the disaster bluntly, saying, "You can't spend $270 million remaking one of the vault's most iconic classics, open to barely $50 million and pretend that's acceptable. The math simply doesn't add up. That film should have been a billion-dollar guaranteed hit." This criticism rings true. Snow White should have been an automatic blockbuster, not only because of its historical significance, but also because of its position as the film that effectively launched the Disney empire. Instead, its disastrous performance has left executives scrambling to explain what went wrong, while analysts point to the controversy, the inflated budget, and a creative direction that alienated audiences. For a property with such deep cultural roots to fail this spectacularly is more than just a financial setback. It's a reputational crisis for Disney itself. Observers have also pointed out an apparent double standard in how the film's stars were treated during the fallout. Rachel Zegler faced intense scrutiny and widespread criticism for her pro-Palestine remarks, with many insiders suggesting her political comments contributed to the collapse of the project's reputation. By contrast, Gal Gadot, who also made public remarks on the Israel-Hamas conflict, did not appear to face comparable backlash or corporate pushback. This disparity has sparked accusations of inconsistent standards being applied to different actors depending on their positions, further fueling the controversy and adding to the sense of unfairness surrounding the film. Complicating matters further is the suggestion that Zegler's difficulties with Disney long predated the Palestine controversy. Reports indicate that during the production of Snow White, she voiced frustrations publicly, including complaints about not being invited to the 2022 Academy Awards, even though she starred in West Side Story, a film nominated for Best Picture. For critics, this reinforced the idea that Zegler was difficult to manage, quick to air grievances, and prone to attracting negative publicity at precisely the moments when Disney needed its leading lady to project confidence and positivity. Taken together, the poor reviews, the box office collapse, the ballooning budget, the political controversies, and the internal double standards, the Snow White remake has come to symbolize one of Disney's most shocking failures in recent memory. What was intended to be a crown jewel in the studio's live-action remake strategy has instead become a cautionary tale of overreach, poor planning, and reputational fallout that will likely haunt both the studio and its star for years to come. Reports suggest that Rachel Zegler was tied up in London during the shooting schedule for Snow White when the Academy Awards took place, and at first, Disney executives were unwilling to release her for the ceremony. To them, the film's production schedule was far too important to risk disruption. But what might have remained an internal scheduling conflict quickly turned into a public embarrassment for the studio. Zegler took her frustrations online, openly complaining about not being invited, and her posts spread rapidly across social media. Fans were shocked that the star of a major studio production, not to mention one of the leads in a Best Picture-nominated film, West Side Story, would be left out of the industry's most prestigious night. In response to the public outcry, the Academy intervened and granted her a ticket, ensuring she would attend. While the move satisfied fans in the short term, the incident left lingering questions. To her critics, Zegler's decision to publicize the matter made her look ungrateful and entitled, willing to embarrass the studio to get her way rather than handling it quietly behind the scenes. What made the situation even more striking was the fact that Zegler's Hollywood story had begun in the most charmed way possible. She had been handpicked by the legendary Steven Spielberg, who cast her as Maria in his reimagining of West Side Story. For a young actress with little prior experience, being discovered and nurtured by one of the most respected filmmakers in history was an extraordinary opportunity, a career-defining break that most aspiring actors would give anything for. Spielberg's backing gave Zegler immediate credibility, awards recognition, and the kind of spotlight that usually takes years to earn. Yet, as her career progressed, the narrative emerging around her suggested that she failed to fully appreciate this golden passport to stardom. Instead of cultivating humility and building goodwill, her choices increasingly framed her as outspoken, defiant, and at times reckless. Hollywood insiders often caution newcomers that fame is both fleeting and fragile. Success doesn't only come from talent, they warn, but from maintaining good relationships with powerful producers, directors, and executives, the very gatekeepers who decide which actors get leading roles and which ones fade into obscurity. By openly clashing with Disney over scheduling, and by making public political remarks that generated massive controversy, Zegler was seen by some as breaking one of Hollywood's unspoken codes: never jeopardize the business with personal battles. It is one thing to have strong convictions. It is another to openly challenge the studio system that helped create your career. This dynamic has fueled the perception that Zegler, rather than playing the game strategically, has been too quick to test the limits of her influence, and in doing so, has alienated people who once championed her. The irony becomes even sharper when compared to her stance on Gina Carano, the former Mandalorian actress dismissed in 2020 after a string of controversial social media posts. At the time, Zegler made remarks that distanced herself from Carano, framing the situation as an
kind of cute little listening party action. Let's do it. Well, sometimes
Example of accountability. She positioned herself on the moral high ground as someone more socially conscious, someone who understood the responsibilities of public figures in the digital age. Yet now, only a few years later, Zegler finds herself in an even harsher spotlight, with critics pointing out that her own political statements and public clashes have arguably caused more disruption than Carano's ever did. The comparison is uncomfortable, and for detractors, it highlights what they view as hypocrisy. Someone who once condemned another actress for speaking out now stumbling into the same trap, with even higher stakes attached. This unfolding drama serves as a reminder of just how quickly the ground can shift beneath any celebrity's feet. In Hollywood, today's moral certainties can easily become tomorrow's controversies, and the same audiences who once cheered someone's boldness can just as quickly condemn them for overstepping. The idea that fame must be balanced with humility, discipline, and discretion has long been a survival lesson passed down in the industry. And Zegler's struggles are increasingly cited as a textbook example of what happens when that balance is lost. Yet, despite the heavy backlash, the tide of public opinion isn't entirely one-sided. Over time, some observers have begun to argue that Zegler is being unfairly scapegoated for the failure of Snow White. They point out that many of the film's problems, its bloated budget, divisive creative direction, and Disney's larger identity crisis, were well beyond her control. On social media, a growing number of users now suggest that she has become a convenient target, blamed for everything from casting choices to political controversies, while other figures, including studio executives and even co-stars, escape scrutiny. Some fans have even highlighted the double standards in how different actors are treated depending on the positions they take on sensitive issues. This gradual shift doesn't erase the challenges she faces, but it does complicate the narrative. Zegler's image, once defined by rapid rise and sudden backlash, is now beginning to blur into something more complex. She is at once a cautionary tale about the dangers of early fame and a potential example of how public opinion, however brutal, can also evolve over time. In an industry where reinvention is often as important as reputation, the coming years will reveal whether Rachel Zegler can turn her controversies into a stepping stone, or whether this chapter marks the beginning of a longer decline. Numerous people across social media platforms have increasingly rallied to her side, presenting her not just as an actress under fire, but as a young woman demonstrating unusual courage in the face of one of the most unforgiving industries in the world. Many of her supporters applaud her willingness to stand by her values, even when those values collide with the carefully managed image Disney and Hollywood at large prefer to project. They point out that speaking out on sensitive global issues, especially ones as polarizing as Palestine and Israel, is almost unheard of for actors tied to billion-dollar franchises. One viral tweet that captured the mood praised her backbone and integrity for refusing to delete her statement, emphasizing that most people in her position would have bowed to studio pressure immediately. The fact that she did not, they argue, shows a streak of authenticity that is rare in a climate where silence is often rewarded and honesty is punished. Others online have gone further, showing sympathy by highlighting her age and relative inexperience in dealing with the brutal mechanics of Hollywood's publicity machine. At 23 years old, they argue, she is still figuring out her career, her voice, and her role in the world. Many her age have the freedom to make mistakes privately, yet Zegler's missteps play out on the global stage, under the gaze of millions. For her defenders, this context matters. They suggest that her comments, however controversial, stem not from arrogance but from youthful conviction and a desire to use her platform for something meaningful. Some even frame her outspokenness as refreshing, especially in contrast to the carefully scripted personas maintained by most Hollywood stars. On the other hand, another group argues she has become a scapegoat for a film that was destined to collapse under its own weight. According to this view, the Snow White remake was burdened with creative flaws from the start. An uninspired script, questionable modernization choices, and an overall lack of the charm that made the original iconic. Combined with growing remake fatigue among Disney's audience, the movie faced steep odds before a single trailer had even dropped. Blaming Rachel Zegler for the film's disastrous reception, they claim, is a convenient distraction from Disney's bigger structural miscalculations. Studios often need someone to take the fall, and in this case, the youngest and most outspoken face of the production has become the easiest target. However, critics of this sympathetic stance respond with equal conviction. They argue that at 23, Zegler is not an inexperienced teenager, but an adult with professional obligations. More importantly, she is not just any actress, but the lead in one of Disney's most expensive and historically significant projects. To them, she had a responsibility to manage her public image with extreme care, especially while under contract. They caution that framing her as too young to know better infantilizes her and denies her agency, effectively excusing her from accountability. From their perspective, Zegler knew the risks, made a deliberate choice to speak out, and must now face the natural consequences of that decision. What happens next could have long-term consequences for her career. Hollywood insiders frequently compare the industry to a high school social hierarchy, cliquish, gossipy, and brutally unforgiving of those who break unspoken rules. Studios and producers tend to shy away from actors linked with controversy, not necessarily because they disagree with their politics, but because they view them as unpredictable liabilities. Even if the controversy has little to do with the film itself, executives fear that association with a difficult or polarizing star could hurt box office sales. Already, Disney's actions suggest they are moving to distance themselves from Snow White as quickly as possible. Reports have surfaced that promotional materials, billboards, and posters have been dismantled in California within weeks of release, an unusually fast retreat that signals the studio has written off the project as a financial and reputational loss. Industry analysts predict that situations like this may lead to a major shift in how Hollywood contracts are written in the future. Studios could begin inserting stricter social media clauses, explicitly banning political commentary during promotional periods, or requiring actors to clear statements with PR teams before posting. Such measures would mark a sharp departure from the past decade, when stars enjoyed unprecedented freedom to build their personal brands online. The growing perception that one actor's tweets can tank a multi-million-dollar investment may push studios into reclaiming that control. If so, Zegler's case could become a cautionary tale that redefines the boundaries of celebrity expression in the digital era. Adding another layer of complexity is her reportedly strained relationship with co-star Gal Gadot. Rumors suggest the two are no longer on speaking terms, with tension escalating after Zegler allegedly referred to Gadot dismissively as a specialist pageant queen at an Oscars-related event. Whether this remark was truly made or has been exaggerated by gossip circles remains unclear, but the story has fueled speculation that Zegler struggles with maintaining diplomacy behind the scenes. In Hollywood, where relationships often carry as much weight as talent, such conflicts can be costly. The perception that she is clashing with established stars only reinforces the narrative of her being difficult to work with, making her already uncertain future in the industry even more precarious. Apparently, this remark infuriated Gadot, creating what insiders describe as an impenetrable barrier between the film's two central leads. What should have been a powerful on-screen partnership instead became clouded by tension and personal friction, further feeding the narrative that Snow White was a troubled production long before its release. For Disney, the stakes tied to the remake could not have been higher. This was meant to be one of the studio's cornerstone projects, an update to the very film that launched the Disney empire back in 1937. Instead, the project has become a glaring example of how even the most iconic properties can collapse when weighed down by poor planning, internal disputes, and controversy. Financially, the picture is dire. Projections suggest the film will struggle to reach $200 million globally, a catastrophic result given that the production and marketing combined are estimated to have cost between $300 and $350 million. In an era when major blockbusters are expected to cross the billion-dollar threshold just to be considered a true success, these numbers represent not just a flop, but a financial nightmare. Disney has weathered flops before, but the failure of Snow White stings in a particular way because of the symbolic weight the title carries. This was supposed to be a safe bet, the kind of remake that practically guaranteed success based on nostalgia alone. Instead, it has become shorthand for creative and cultural miscalculation. This collapse also arrives at a particularly fragile moment for Disney as a company. Over the past several years, its once reliable brands, Marvel, Pixar, Star Wars, and the live-action remake division, have all produced underwhelming returns. Fans complain of franchise fatigue, critics argue that the studio has lost touch with the magic that once defined it, and shareholders are demanding answers. Against this backdrop, Snow White's implosion feels less like an isolated misstep and more like part of a dangerous pattern threatening Disney's long-term dominance. What many industry observers find especially telling is the speed with which Hollywood moves to cast out actors who break its unspoken rules. Rachel Zegler's situation illustrates how quickly a promising young star can go from Hollywood's golden child to persona non grata. Analysts note that the most enduring figures in the industry often steer clear of controversy altogether, either avoiding social media or outsourcing their online presence to tightly managed PR teams. Stars like Samuel L. Jackson, Elizabeth Olsen, and Denzel Washington are frequently cited as examples of actors who maintain their careers by staying disciplined, rarely letting their personal views overshadow their professional work. From a business standpoint, this strategy is brutally logical. When an actor is tied to a multi-hundred-million-dollar franchise, even a single divisive statement can alienate millions of potential ticket buyers. Social media likes and retweets might create the illusion of widespread support, but they rarely translate into box office dollars. Snow White's disastrous performance is a textbook case of this disconnect. While Zegler received praise online from fans who admired her courage, the financial reality suggests that far more people were put off than persuaded. Studios, being risk-averse by nature, are unlikely to ignore such a costly lesson. This entire controversy has reignited broader debates about the role of politics in entertainment. Increasingly, audiences express frustration at movies and shows that feel more like ideological battlegrounds than sources of escapism. What's notable is that this fatigue isn't confined to one political camp. Viewers across the spectrum, conservative, liberal, and apolitical alike, are voicing a desire for entertainment that unites rather than divides, stories that bring people together instead of reinforcing ideological rifts. Disney, once synonymous with universal family-friendly magic, now finds itself at the center of this debate, with Snow White serving as a cautionary tale of what happens when corporate storytelling collides with cultural polarization. For Rachel Zegler, the implications are deeply personal. On one hand, some admire her for standing firm in her beliefs, portraying her as a rare voice of authenticity in an industry dominated by corporate messaging. On the other hand, admiration does not pay the bills, and in Hollywood, perception often matters more than principle. Industry analysts predict she may face a significant scaling back of opportunities, moving from headlining massive studio tentpoles to taking on supporting roles in smaller projects. Instead of being marketed as the next Disney princess, she may find herself relegated to side characters, romantic interests, or ensemble casts, a sharp contrast to the trajectory once promised to her. Perhaps the most concerning element, however, lies beyond the financial and career fallout. For a young performer, the psychological strain of such public scrutiny and blame can be immense. Being positioned as the scapegoat for a $300 million failure at just 23 years old is a burden few could withstand without long-lasting effects. Social media amplifies every criticism, gossip outlets fuel endless speculation, and industry whispers can shut doors before they even open. In this sense, Zegler's story is not just about one film or one controversy, it reflects the harsh realities of Hollywood itself, where reputations are fragile, careers are fickle, and the line between rising star and cautionary tale can be crossed in a single news cycle. From being celebrated as the next big star in Hollywood to suddenly serving as a warning story, the journey illustrates just how fragile fame can be and how quickly it can turn into a source of deep personal struggle. Rising actors are often placed on a pedestal, expected to represent hope, progress, and the future of the industry. Yet the same system that lifts them up can just as quickly push them down when controversy or disappointment enters the picture. The emotional and psychological toll of such reversals can be devastating, leading not only to public humiliation, but also to lasting damage to mental health. Many performers struggle with depression, anxiety, or the feeling of being abandoned by the very audience that once praised them. When these pressures strike early in life, before a performer has the chance to develop resilience, the consequences can be particularly severe. What stands out most in this controversy is how it exposes Hollywood's ongoing contradictions. The industry projects itself as progressive and forward-thinking, selling the idea that it values inclusivity, social justice, and authenticity. Studios highlight these ideals in marketing campaigns, award shows, and public statements. However, behind the scenes, the truth is far less idealistic. Hollywood still operates as a business first, where the bottom line matters more than ideals. Stars are expected to appear morally upright and socially aware in public, while also staying marketable and controversy-free in practice. This double expectation creates an impossible standard. Actors must appear genuine, yet remain carefully managed, outspoken, yet never offensive, relatable, yet larger than life. In today's polarized environment, where every word is scrutinized on social media, that balance is almost impossible to maintain for long. Disney's response to the Snow White backlash demonstrates just how much the rules of the game may be changing. For decades, stars tied to massive franchises had significant leeway to speak their minds, trusting that their talent and popularity would outweigh any controversy. That era now seems to be fading. Increasingly, studios may impose new restrictions, tighter contracts that limit political expression, clauses that ban actors from making controversial statements during press tours, and stricter monitoring of social media. These measures could fundamentally reshape the relationship between actors and the studios that employ them, placing creative individuals under stricter corporate control in exchange for career security and public exposure. Complicating matters further is the inconsistency on both sides. Disney itself has been accused of selectively applying rules, punishing some actors for their political remarks while overlooking others when it serves business interests. Meanwhile, audiences who insist they support free speech often withdraw that support when a celebrity voices opinions they dislike. This double standard reveals that the conflict is less about principle and more about perception, who gets to speak and whose words are acceptable in the moment. The most telling sign that Disney has abandoned Snow White is the abrupt dismantling of its marketing campaign. Pulling posters and advertisements so soon after release signals a complete loss of confidence. For investors, this is alarming. Just a few years ago, Disney dominated global entertainment with its Marvel, Star Wars, Pixar, and live-action remakes. But recent failures, audience fatigue, and rising competition have weakened its dominance. The collapse of Snow White, a project meant to honor Disney's very beginnings, underscores just how precarious the company's standing has become. For shareholders, it's not only about one film's failure, but about whether the entire strategy of remakes and reboots is running out of steam. The broader lesson, however, lies in the changing bond between celebrities and audiences. In the social media age, performers can speak directly to millions of fans without relying on press agents or studios. This direct access can build loyalty and authenticity, but it also exposes stars to backlash in real time. Increasingly, the most successful actors realize that maintaining some degree of separation between their private beliefs and their public image is essential to career longevity. The public may enjoy moments of candor, but history shows that audiences quickly turn on celebrities who share too much or appear too divisive. Industry insiders often summarize it simply: audiences go to the movies for escapism and entertainment, not to be lectured. They may tolerate weak scripts or uneven performances, but they are far less forgiving when they feel alienated or attacked by a star's personal opinions. This reality seems to unite viewers across political lines, many of whom express fatigue with entertainment that prioritizes activism over storytelling. For those just entering the industry, the message is clear. In a world where hundreds of talented actors are competing for each role, giving executives even a small reason to doubt your reliability can cost you a career-defining opportunity. Long-term success is not just about talent. It requires discipline, careful image management, and a keen awareness of how to navigate the complex relationship between art, commerce, and public perception.